Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our remote meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. I am Councillor Lucy Hovels, Chair of the panel. Please note this meeting is being broadcast live through the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. I would like to give you a warm welcome to members, officers and members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of this meeting. Before I commence with the formal business on the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping rules. And to make this meeting run as efficiently as possible, please do bear with us as it's very new to us all. For those participating in the meeting, if you could only speak when invited to speak by myself as chair, keep your microphone on mute at all times unless invited to speak. And if you could indicate using the function that you want to speak, I'm sure we'll be able to run the meeting smoothly. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and the position unless you have already introduced yourself earlier. If I lose my connection, please note that Councillor Brian Jones, Vice Chair of this committee, will take over in my absence until the connection is restored. I'll move straight on with the meeting and I go to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Can I ask Ian if there's any apologies, please? Ian Croft.
We have an apology, Chair, from Councillor Simmons.
We note that apology. Do we have any substitute members?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Liz Brown as a substitute member for Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Is any declarations from any members? No declarations. We'll move on to item 4. And can I give a very warm welcome to the people who are attending this meeting this morning, Sharon Cadell and also Steve White and Camilla. I'll go straight on with the proposed appointment of the temporary Chief Executive for the Office of the Durham Police and Crime Victim Commissioner. And can I ask Camilla to present Helen Lynch's report, please?
Thank you. Good morning all. I'm Camilla Coulson-Patel, the Governance Solicitor for Durham County Council, and today I'm presenting the report of the Head of Legal and Democratic Services and the Clerk to the Police and Crime Panel, which is shown at pages 3 to 5 of your pack. The report is to advise panel members on the process of a confirmation hearing and to consider the report of the Acting Police, Crime and Victim Commissioner for the proposed candidate to the post of Temporary Chief Executive to the Office of the Police, Crime and Victim Commissioner. Schedule 1, paragraph 6.1a of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011 states that the Police and Crime Commissioner must appoint a person to be the head of the Commissioner's staff, referred to in this part as the Commissioner's Chief Executive. The substantive post holder to this role is Mr. Steve White, who was appointed in October 2018. The history which follows is known to panel members, in that, in September 2019, Mr. White was appointed as the acting PCVC due to the incapacity and later passing of the elected PCVC. Mr. John Carling held the role of acting Chief Executive, which was confirmed by the panel in October 2019. Mr. Carling has now secured alternative employment, leaving a vacancy to the role of temporary or acting Chief Exec. The recruitment process will be outlined by the acting PCVC, and I draw your attention to Appendix 3, shown at pages 11 of your pack, which outlines the recruitment exercise which has been undertaken. On the 28th of May 2020, the panel received notification of the proposed appointment of Mrs. Sharon Cadell. Moving to the procedure to be followed today, it is required that a confirmation hearing takes place within 3 weeks of the notification. Appendix 2 of the report, shown at pages 7 through to 10, details the procedure which will be followed today, and I will now outline that procedure for the benefit of members. The purpose of the confirmation hearing is not intended to duplicate the PCVC recruitment. This is a two-stage process where the panel will question the candidate to determine if she meets the criteria set out in the role profile and whether she possesses the professional competence and personal independence to carry out the role. The second part is to determine whether to endorse the appointment, which is considered in closed session. The first stage of the confirmation hearing, as set out before, is to determine the professional competence and personal independence. This is done through questions put to the candidate. As the questions are limited only to the professional competence and personal independence, in the event that there are any potentially inappropriate questions which do not cover these qualities, the Chair will signify this. The second stage of the process is the decision making, which will immediately follow the questions and any points of clarification. This will take place through the closed session, where the panel can reach a decision and prepare the recommendation to the PCVC. During the closed session, members can evaluate whether the proposed candidate has the professional competence and personal independence as set out in the role profile. The decision and the recommendation of the panel will be communicated to the PCVC following the meeting by way of a letter. It is important to note that unlike the appointment of the Chief Constable, there is no right of veto for this appointment. The panel can only make its recommendations on the appointment. Chair, that outlines the procedure to be followed today in this confirmation hearing, and I would like to remind members of the recommendations that accompany this report, shown at paragraph 3, page 3, which is members are asked to 1. Note the process to be followed for the confirmation hearing as detailed at Appendix 2. 2. Consider the report of the acting PCVC at Appendix 3 and the recommendation to appoint Mrs. Sharon Cadell as the temporary Chief Executive to the office of the PCVC. 3. To respond to the acting PCVC endorsing the appointment or otherwise in accordance with the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011. Chair, I will hand back to you and take any questions before you invite Mr. White to detail the recruitment process.
Thank you, Camilla. Does any member have any questions? No questions. Can I now invite Steve White to present his report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody. It seems like an age ago since we last met, and indeed a lot has happened since then. I just wanted to give a little bit of context, which perhaps doesn't need explanation, but in terms of the situation in which the office found itself in somewhat extraordinary circumstances, particularly with the extension of my role as acting PCVC as a result of COVID, the COVID emergency, and then it's fair to say that we were dealing with extraordinary circumstances in terms of needing to recruit a temporary chief executive, but also doing that whilst at the same time managing the COVID public health emergency. It has been very challenging. And I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Helen, Lynch and her team for helping this process, for the convening of the police and crime panel, and so therefore my thanks to you all so that we could get this process completed, and indeed to the Force HR and my own office that have been working very hard to keep the show on the road. I just also wanted to give some reassurance that since the departure of Mr. Carling, I changed as acting PCVC the responsibilities of delegation to ensure that they're maintained a continuity of independence around a monitoring officer and head of paid service, the two statutory roles that are encompassed in the role as chief executive, to ensure that there has been some independent oversight whilst I've been effectively double hatting as both the acting PCVC and the chief executive, and trying to keep the office and the show on the road, as it were, at a fairly challenging time. As a consequence of all of that, I dare say you can probably imagine that I will be quite relieved once we have this process concluded, and Sharon, I very much hope, is able to join the office and take some of the burden to keep the show on the road, which I'm clearly looking forward to. So the actual recruitment process was quite challenging, and I just wanted to speak briefly around the difference between the situation that we find ourselves in now and that we had before back in September. When I was appointed acting PCVC and then therefore had to appoint an acting chief executive, that was for a defined period of time to take us up to the then scheduled elections in early May of this year. As a consequence of that, with it being relatively time limited, it seemed to make sense to appoint an acting from the existing office was probably the most straightforward way forwards. With the advent of the COVID crisis and the projected delays of the elections to at least May 21, that rather changed the dynamic. So that when Mr. Carling left, I thought long and hard as to whether or not another acting would be appointed from within the office, or whether or not I needed to cast the net a little bit wider. I took a lot of advice, and I thought long and hard about it, and determined that because it was for at least a minimum of 12 months, and who knows what's going to happen between now and next May, I felt that it was appropriate to cast the net a little bit wider to ensure that we were able to recruit someone who was able to really assist me. And that's not to say that I didn't think that anyone from my office was able to do that, but I wanted to make sure there was an open and transparent process to which my existing staff were able to apply, and indeed some did, and we had an open process. So we went out to advert, and again, because of the time pressures and because of the need to get this statutory role filled, we kept it relatively tight. The advert went live for a period of two weeks, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised by the level of interest that we had, particularly given that we were in the extremis of lockdown at that time, and so it was quite a challenging recruitment process. There were 13 applicants overall. We shortlisted those down to 5, who then appeared before the interview panel, as I've set out in the report, and the details are there. I think it's fair to say that Sharon, to a certain extent, has had an unfair advantage because she's doing the job in North Yorkshire. North Yorkshire is a very large force. It's a very challenging force. And Sharon, as the assistant chief executive there, has been doing a very good job in what has been a challenging time. And certainly I got to say that the panel were unanimous in the view that in terms of her responses to the questions and looking at her application, that she was demonstrably above the other candidates, who I have to say were also very good candidates. So I was very pleased by the process. I was very pleased that Sharon threw her hat into the ring, and I'm delighted that she came through the process relatively unscathed, and I hope I'm going to be in a position later this week to be able to formally offer her the position, and that she can start as soon as we can negotiate. One minor point, which is in fact an indication of a greater strength that Sharon has, is that she's currently, because she clearly doesn't have enough to do, she's currently studying for a master's in, I believe it's police management and criminology with Cambridge University, which I will be continuing to allow her to have some time to complete. She's approaching the dissertation phase of that. But I'm going to take full advantage of the knowledge that she is having through that academic study period, and take full advantage of her whilst I hope that she's working with us and bringing some freshness and some new ideas to the office that perhaps I can unashamedly steal. I would just also like to say that it's been a very strange process trying to recruit someone for one's own job. It's rather challenging. It's something that I've never had to do before. But I'm sure in the conversations that I've had with Sharon that in terms of the team approach that we're going to have, because in 12 months' time, one hopes that things will go back to a near normal, although I'm not entirely sure what normal means nowadays, when I shall be stepping back into the substantive role, and hopefully the democratic process will be up and running and we will have a new Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm happy to take any questions, but that's my report as is set out in Appendix 3, Lucy.
Thank you, Steve, which leads us on to questions. I have had indication, a question from Councillor Brian Jones.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Sharon. Can you hear me? Hello, anybody hear me?
Good morning,
Yeah,
Councillor Jones. Thank you, I can.
Sharon, can you please highlight for the panel the main areas of expertise you have which will enable you to undertake the role of acting Chief Executive effectively?
Okay. Right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's an absolute delight to be invited to this confirmation hearing this morning, and I'm delighted to have gotten as far as this stage and to be able to answer your questions too. I bring with me nearly 20 years of public sector expertise. So primarily in local government, I did around 10 years at Middlesbrough Council in a statutory monitoring officer role, covering a number of high-level portfolio areas, specifically relating to vulnerability issues and also crime and disorder issues. So I was heavily engaged in what was then the Crime and Disorder Reduction Partnership and community safety work that the local authority was engaged in. And from that, I have developed a body of knowledge and certainly a body of contacts and skills and experience along the way. I do have particular expertise areas, including violence against women and girls, and indeed Steve referred to the masters that I'm doing at University of Cambridge, which is applied criminology and senior police leadership. And the thesis topic that I have chosen is around domestic homicides, domestic abuse and preventing high harm. So as I say, that's a passion and a body of knowledge that's been developed over a long time. And I mention that because that's absolutely transferable within this area of work, as are the other areas that I have significant interests in as well. Housing, homelessness issues, mental health, substance misuse, and so on, all of which overlap quite well, I think, in terms of Police and Crime Commissioner responsibilities and, broadly speaking, responsibilities of community safety partnerships too. Apart from that, I think you would want to be assured of my governance expertise as well. Well, as mentioned, I come from public sector background. I've worked in not just local authority, I worked for a while in a third sector organisation as well, as the manager of domestic abuse charity. And then more recently, I've done actually a couple of stints in Police and Crime Commissioners' offices as well. So first of all, as project manager within the Cleveland Police and Crime Commissioners' office for domestic abuse programme, and then, as Steve has referred to, more recently as an assistant chief executive in the North Yorkshire Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's office. So I'm very much immersed within the world of the kind of Policing Reform and Social Responsibility Act, and that relationship with the police force, and ensuring that that is a healthy and functioning relationship at all tiers, so that the residents of all the areas in which we serve get the best possible deal that we can deliver to them as public servants. I'm absolutely passionate about that, but more passionate about making sure that the service that we deliver is enabled to be as efficient and effective as possible, by making sure that the people that we manage are supported and in the best place to give their best to residents as well. And it goes beyond that, and I may be intruding upon other questions that you may wish to ask, and I hope you won't mind me repeating myself. But it goes beyond that. This is about good stakeholder relationships and good management of those working partnerships as well. So I think, just to kind of touch on the partners I've typically engaged in with police service, naturally, from chief officer team, kind of right through the ranks, fire service within North Yorkshire and Cleveland, National Probation Service and the community rehabilitation companies, although that is all set to change. And then health services, so clinical commissioning groups, and specifically with an interest in domestic abuse, those third sector partners as well. So I've and I could say more. That's certainly not an exhaustive list by any stretch. Civil society, faith partners, they all matter in terms of forming a cohesive partnership around community safety, and garnering kind of public confidence in the services that we deliver, but more importantly in listening to them and responding to their needs as well.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I think if we got into an exhaustive list, we could be here for some time.
Indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I have another 2 questions that's been put forward from members of the panel, Sharon, and the directed to yourself. I'll bring in Councillor David Boyes.
Councillor Boyes on mute.
David, can you unmute your mic? Are you there? Have we lost Councillor Boyes? Right, I shall move the agenda on then. I'm sure he'll join us when he can. I'll go to Derek Dodwell, another panel member who has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Sharon. I'm Derek Dodwell. I'm one of the 2 independent members of the crime panel. And I'd just simply like to ask how you will ensure a constructive relationship between the acting PCVC and the panel is maintained at all times.
Okay, so there's a number of ways in which I've achieved this in the past. So I've worked, as I've mentioned, with Barry Coppinger and Julia Mulligan in North Yorkshire, and a close kind of understanding of the priorities of the Police and Crime Commissioner, obviously called PCVC, in Durham, is essential. And then forming a good relationship with members of the Police and Crime Panel, and specifically the Secretariat as well. So I will be looking to get to know you all, and hopefully meet up with you and have conversations with you and understand your own priorities as well. Community safety is kind of is naturally something that many of us care about and work hard towards. However, it's important to understand people's different perspectives on the matter. So ensuring a close relationship will be very much around understanding those views more closely, and kind of working with Steve in terms of kind of communicating and kind of mediating any views, and ensuring that we are answering any questions you might have in terms of a panel who is set up both to support the Police and Crime Commissioner and then to hold them to account as well. It's naturally the Police and Crime Commissioner's role to hold the police force to account, but the way that I have worked previously is ensuring that I have a solid understanding of what assurances you would like and what things that you would like to probe in terms of your any kind of questions that you might like to raise within future police and crime panels as well. And that in supporting Steve, I can ensure that he is fully prepared and has all the materials and resources to hand in order to be able to kind of attend panel meetings and have full dialogue with yourselves as members.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Chair. It was a very forthright answer. Thank you.
Hi, Chair. I'm now unmuted, so I can ask my question if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll bring you in, Councillor David Boyce.
Okay. Hi, Sharon. David Boyce, I'm a panel member. You sort of touched on the first question some of the stuff I'm going to ask you, but I'll ask it anyway. So, who do you regard as key stakeholders that you would work with within the role? And can you provide examples of how you have worked with a range of organisations, partnerships and agencies?
Okay. So my answer to this, David, is that there's no fixed list in terms of the stakeholders that we need to work with within Police and Crime Commissioners' offices. It's you know, we know that it's an evolving picture in terms of partnerships out there, and that the changes that go on centrally, that the government mandate, often lead to the creation of new bodies or new initiatives and so on. So it's incumbent upon us to keep a close eye on that, and the way of doing that is to constantly engage with those local partners. The main stakeholder within Police and Crime Commissioner's office is we commission the policing service, and naturally a lot of focus has to be on them. But more broadly speaking, community safety is not something that is just wholly delivered by police. There is a point around legitimacy and around understanding public and partnership perspectives as well. So it's absolutely important that we would be engaging with the likes of the local authorities in the area. I've mentioned also probation and the as-is community rehabilitation companies, those responsible for reducing reoffending, and just taking cognizance of the things that police and crime commissioners are responsible for. So things like victim support, commissioning of victim services and community safety initiatives and so on. Again, it would be absolutely incumbent upon me to engage properly with the likes of the third sector organisations and then civic society organisations as well. So I have, because I live kind of on the border of Cleveland and Durham, and because I've worked for quite a long time in, as I say, in a kind of commissioning and managerial strategic lead role within the public sector, I do have already a number of contacts within the region, at the likes of Harbour, for instance, Harbour Domestic Abuse Services. So I have a very well established relationship with them already, I'm happy to say. But as I say, you know, this isn't one where I would where I have ever rested upon my laurels. It's one that have to kind of go out, attend meetings, speak to people, make a point of introducing myself, keeping up kind of regular conversations and so on, and engaging in activities and kind of various discussions and so on to understand who our partners are. There's some fantastic initiatives that go on at grassroots level that again, you know, we can get a lot of value out of supporting and promoting and helping to kind of flourish as best we can within the public sector space. So I'm very much around kind of keeping a close eye on the horizon, scanning fully for who's out there and making sure that I engage with them. I think other kind of partners that I would need to engage with are kind of the health services, primarily because they've got such a huge footprint within safeguarding and kind of support for vulnerable people in the communities as well. So clinical commissioning groups, North East Ambulance Trust, the hospital trusts and so on. I would be making a point of making contact with them as well. And then at national level, I think kind of regional level, you know, we've got kind of the 3 PCCs set up that Vera and Ron traditionally engaged in with Barry Coppinger. Need to kind of be liaising with with my counterpart chief executives there. And then there's kind of the whole kind of 7 force arrangements as well, Northeast Transformation and innovation collaboration as well. So there's work around serious organised crime, various collaborations that go on around firearms and so on as well. And beyond that, it's kind of about engaging at a national level as well. So Home Office, Ministry of Justice, the NPCC and Association of Police and Crime Commissioners as well. Those are all mightily useful contacts, and I've certainly found them helpful thus far within my career and within kind of working collegiately and collaboratively to drive forward work programmes and so on and deliver those successfully. David, I think you asked me a second part of that question around examples that I could give you. If I could prevail upon you just to repeat that part.
I'll have to get back to it.
I think it was around examples of where I have worked
that's right.
with major stakeholders. So there's a few examples I could give here, and I'll try to strum it down. 2 major pieces of work that I have led on. Within North Yorkshire, the implementation of an ambitious complaints and misconduct model, which required quite a lot of engagement with kind of the police as an organisation themselves, but then also kind of representative bodies, so unions and so on. And all those who have kind of responsibility for police and police staff welfare issues. So that was a major piece of work. We had to consult on it, develop a business case, and required quite a lot of kind of liaison with all those stakeholders to that model of work, not least the public of North Yorkshire as well. So did quite a lot of kind of consultation work to understand people's views and so on around that. That's one example. And a second example that I can give is around being a programme manager within Cleveland Police and Crime Commissioner's Office as part of a 6-force initiative, domestic abuse whole system approach. It was a Home Office funded, time limited, but relatively high profile initiative, and it was quite ambitious and transformative within its its kind of vision statement. And it was around really raising the profile of domestic abuse and really challenging the police and partner agencies to work in a way that could better serve victims of domestic abuse, but could also realise significant efficiencies around kind of the way that police were engaging with victims, achieving the 3 Pelian domains of effectiveness, efficiency and legitimacy. What's the best way to engage? Is that the leanest way that we can engage? How can we prevent repeat demand that we could possibly prevent? How can we prevent serious harm? And critically, how can we achieve legitimacy with victims who've failed by multiple services over the years? It was particularly challenging because it required us not just to engage with the police as commissioned service, but also third sector, local authority, partners, including those who have public health responsibilities, and then the courts. So, you know, we're fairly used to, in police and crime commissioning world, engaging with our criminal justice partners, and the likes of Crown Prosecution Service, Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Service, and then kind of all those working within criminal justice hearings. But this pushed it further, and it required us to work with family and civil courts as well. So I mentioned that because that was a hugely ambitious project, and required me to really go knocking at doors and to engage those partners, and to kind of set a tone for how it would benefit them to work with us in terms of engaging with the whole project and working with me to deliver the outcomes and outputs associated with that project as well. I have to say it was quite a hard piece of work, but so rewarding, because it really got all local partners around the table for one of the first times that had ever happened, and got people it kind of synced in to the same narrative around, okay, we all care about domestic abuse, but how can we make this better? And we worked through that. It was as I say, it was a hard piece of work, because those things, as all of us in public sector know, when you have multiple agency partners, are not easy to achieve. But it is around careful dialogue, and where needed, sometimes negotiation and compromise as well. So I'm happy to say that that was a really successfully delivered project. Certainly, I wouldn't accept all the credit for that myself. That was very much around having established really solid relationships and people coming with me, people being really engaged and really supportive of the whole agenda. Okay.
Can I ask a quick supplementary question, Chair?
David?
I can. It's just, Sharon, as we come out of the COVID pandemic, and we're obviously all going to be facing major financial pressures on all our budgets, how important do you think it is to forge relationships with other organisations and partnerships? And what will we do to try and reach the hard-to-reach groups who are going to be most in need? But obviously, because of the hard-to-reach groups, it's hard to find out who they are and what their needs are.
Yeah. So thank you, David. Undoubtedly, we've lived through one of the most unique periods that any of us have ever seen, and on a public sector level, I think it presents so many challenges. We don't know for sure kind of what funding settlements will be like in the future, but I think it would be reasonable to assume that there may be kind of we may be charged with being as lean and efficient as we possibly can. One of the ways that can be achieved, I mean, there's a point there around looking inwardly and checking we're as streamlined as we can be, And sometimes that means a very root and branch look kind of through everything we're doing. Why do we do it? Is that the best way to achieve that particular output or that outcome? And try and sort of strip out as much waste as possible. But there are other ways to achieve that. I'm a great believer in partnership working. It's one of the things within my working career that I've gotten most satisfaction out of, because together we can achieve more. And that doesn't necessarily mean, when we talk about commissioning, that doesn't necessarily mean about pooling budgets together. Great if we can, but sometimes it's just around coming together and delivering, kind of putting other resources together, delivering initiatives differently. Can we look at other ways of doing scrutiny, of doing health, looking after our people and so on? Is there room to engage in consultation, to deliver those things jointly as well? So, as I say, a huge believer in kind of collaboration opportunities, and collegiate working, I think, is one of the greatest things that I've kind of been able to make best use of as well over certainly the past few years, and certainly within my Cambridge studies as well, just tapping into a body of knowledge there around, okay, we might not have the answer here locally, or we might be faced with a quite unique situation which we haven't necessarily come across before, or we might say that other areas have done something really interesting, quite exciting, which offers quite sort of exciting potential as well. How can we tap into that? So, I'm as I say, that kind of collegiate working, I think, is really helpful. I am well tapped into a network regionally, locally, and these days nationally as well. So I would be making as much use of that as possible. And as I say, always with that kind of that objective in mind, right? How can we get the best? How can we make sure that Durham is in the best shape it can be, both internally as PCC office, working with our police service, and then with our broad community safety partners as well? I think the hard to reach group is a really interesting question, because this is where I started my career, with extremely vulnerable people, homeless people, rough sleepers. So going back through the mists of time, I started as a volunteer at a law centre in Middlesbrough, for anybody who remembers the old law centres. So I worked as a volunteer, and then I worked in a local housing aid trust as well. So I think, I don't say this lightly, but I do believe I have a great deal of experience with an extremely hard to reach and very marginalised group whose needs are kind of often not met through public services, not working collegiately, not working collaboratively when they could. The kind of engagement is really about going out to those groups as well, and understanding where the ins are. As I say, our civic society partners, and I'm glad there's been greater recognition of those over more recent years, but our civic society partners, those people working at grassroots in communities, who are the eyes and ears of those communities, have a huge amount of knowledge to offer to us, who can tell us things going on at a local level. I wouldn't dismiss as well the role of neighbourhood policing, and again, their eyes and ears out in our local areas, and can engage with people who can let us know what's going on, giving us, they will give the police vital intelligence, but for a police and crime commissioner's office, who are charged with supporting victims and supporting the policing and supporting community safety. As I say, I believe it's absolutely incumbent upon us to listen to that, keep scanning it carefully, and to engage with all of those partners who can make us aware of what the needs are and what we need to be developing and responding to. as proactively as possible, I would hope. But, you know, I am aware that we often do quite a lot of that on a quite reactive basis. We definitely need to kind of shift towards early intervention. It's a mantra that I've held for a lot of years within my public sector work. I hope that's answered your question, David. If there's anything I've missed off there, do please let me know.
No, that was a very full and comprehensive response. Thanks very much, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon, and thanks, members, for the questions. I'll move the item on to item 5, any other business, and I haven't been notified of any other business. So it moves us on to item 6, which is exclusion of the public. At this point, can we agree the resolution and move into the part B of the meeting? Can I ask Councillor Brian Jones to be a mover for this resolution, please?
Yes, Chair, move into part B.
Can I ask Councillor David Boyce to second the resolution, please?
Yes, I formally second that resolution, Chair.
That concludes the business for the public part of the meeting, and before the broadcast ends, I'd like to thank those of the public, the media who have watched this meeting. Could all members please ensure their microphones are on mute until we have received confirmation that the live broadcast has ended, and then we'll move into the second part of the meeting. Can I thank Sharon and for Steve for joining this party of the meeting?
Pleasure. Thank you all. I'll look forward to hearing from you, hopefully a little bit later, and see you all perhaps in the flesh before too long.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.